You are a human being first before you become a lawyer. So let's not forget that very, very big component, that role that we have. Whether you're a judge, whether you're a most prominent lawyer in town, and I think as judges and as lawyers, I think this is where it's not just about winning the case.
Hi, we have Dr. Shamini, professor of Birmingham University and a PhD holder in law and ethics with us today. To tell about her, she is a dual qualified lawyer from Malaysia and the UK. And more than practice, she is a lawyer who focuses on empowerment of young lawyers, students, and has a passion to train and mold students. Let's welcome her.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Shamini. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me here.
Shamini, I would like to directly get into the podcast. The first question would be, why did you choose law?
For many reasons, but the main reason is to give a voice to those who are vulnerable. And I started thinking about law from the age of 5, having the courage that I have, having the confidence that I have. I felt that I was rightly positioned to become a lawyer.
How much importance would you give for a skill over law?
Very much. So, at least 90% of the law study is about developing certain skills. So, for example, critical analysis, critical evaluation, problem solving, negotiation skills, communication skills. These are skills that are demanded by most institutions, if not all institutions. So my way of looking at law and the study of law and what you study as the substance of law is something that you can get it anywhere. When I was studying law, it was not as easy and simple as today. We had to go to the library. Sometimes I had to order certain articles from the British Library in London. So there was considerable challenge involved in trying to get access to the substance. But today, information is available at your fingertips. But skills are not easy to teach. If you look at every module at the university, each module comes up with the learning intended outcomes, the learning intended skills. And to actually thrive as a lawyer or any person who's employable, you've got to be able to demonstrate these skills in a very, very efficient manner. So for me, teaching law is easy, but harnessing those skills, inculcating those skills takes a lot of time. In fact, I can say that I am still learning, given, a 25-year experience as both as a lawyer as well as an academic.
From Malaysia to the UK, how was that journey?
It was very, very adventurous. It was fun at the beginning. It was exciting. I practiced law for a few years in Malaysia before I actually moved to the UK. And the work that I actually did in Malaysia was quite challenging, because at a very, very young age, while I was in training and I was chambering, I was already given some very difficult cases. I was literally in court every single day. Over the weekends, I was actually putting questions, cross-examination questions for full trials. So I worked 7 days a week, 365 days. Maybe I had a couple of days off. But the first 3 to 4 years of my legal experience, it involved a lot of work. And in the first year I did a lot of criminal law, I did a lot of personal injury matters, and then I moved on into commercial law. But I was actually headhunted by the second firm, in fact, the firm that I left before going to the UK. I was actually headhunted because of the value, the prestigious work that I used to do both in the High Court as well in the Court of Appeal. I was sent to the Court of Appeal in my second month of practice. I was handed a file at 4 p.m. by the partner of the firm saying that tomorrow you'll be going to court in front of 3 judges in Kuala Lumpur. And I succeeded in that application, but what it meant is that from the early days, from the start of the profession, I've worked relentlessly hard. So when but of course that desire to grow has always been there. More than 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the desire to grow was always there. And I've always wondered what, education in the UK feels like, because all my friends have done it, most of my friends have done it, and I wanted to experience that as well. But I also did not want to lose my seniority as a lawyer. In Malaysia, 7 years you'll be a senior lawyer, and I had the ambition of actually setting up my own law firm. So when this opportunity came to study at Newcastle University doing an LLM in international trade, I said, I'm going to do it. And on top of that, I also got a scholarship to do it. I actually was the top student, in fact, in my first year of law in Malaysia, and I got a scholarship for the second year. So I used that, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go there. I'm going to do 9 months. I'll start in September, I finish in June, and then the 3 months of writing the dissertation, I'll do it from Malaysia whilst I'm in practice. Because, we work hard. I come from a family where, we work hard at anything that we want to achieve. So when I went, even before I landed in the UK, because of course, father and mother were not sponsoring that degree, I had to find a job. I had to look for, employment opportunities. And I worked with 3 different departments at the university. And whilst I was working for the LLM, and whilst I was doing my LLM, whilst working with these different employers, I was also doing my Qualified Lawyers Transfer Test, which is what we call today as something like the SQE. And I did that in the summer, whilst also writing my dissertation. So I've always had my hands full, so to speak. I've always had my hands full throughout my career, doing various things, because I know time is essential. Time is of essence. It's very, very limited. So I make the best of what I've got. And so the journey was exciting, adventurous, but it was also exhausting because I was trying to do everything I could. I did not want to pass up any opportunity. And I think it did work out fine at the end of the day, because I was actually, again, the head of school, or the ex-head of school of Newcastle Law School, approached me at one of the careers event, because I was also working with the careers office, I was working with the admissions office, I was also working with the scholarships office, doing some pro bono work to collect money for students for Newcastle University, for the alumni department. So he came up to me and he said, "You're very enterprising, aren't you?" That's what he said. So it seems that I didn't have to do much. I just had to be visible for him to make that statement or that comment, which also meant when I finished when I got called to the bar, when I got admitted to the role of solicitors, I had an offer also from Newcastle Law School to set up a program for international students, which I did, and I received about 4 to 5 commendations of exemplary practice from the university. Externally also, I published my research for those students based on the programs. So I think, hard work does pay off, but I think strategizing where you want to be every year is quite important. I know people say you have to have 5-year plan, 10-year plan, 15-year plan, but I feel that when you have a lot to do, I strategize on 1-year plan. This is what I want to achieve, because it's easy to plan what you want to do in 5 years and it may not crystallize, and then you'll be kicking yourself for it. So the way I look at it is 2-month plan, 3-month plan, think about the year rather than thinking about 5 and 10 and 15, 25 years. Of course, at the end of the day, we all are visionaries. We hope to see ourselves doing something or somewhere. Sometimes this vision comes earlier in life, but sometimes it comes much, much later in life. And for some people, it never actually comes. So I think we need to address, that elephant in the room. What if your vision never crystallizes or never materializes? What do you do in those situations? Or how do you avoid, that situation where it doesn't materialize? So we've got to think about what can we do on a daily basis to shape our career, to make transformative changes in your life.
You have had a global legal career. How do you adapt yourself to a jurisdiction?
It's not easy again. Nothing is ever easy. But a little bit of research actually helps. So moving from Malaysia to the UK meant also, cultural changes, cultural shifts, challenging your beliefs, And we all go through some level of identity crisis. I mean, it's not really a crisis. People make it sound like, you're running with your, like a headless chicken, but it's not exactly a crisis. It's just that you've got to understand who you are in that particular environment, despite not being in your own comfortable environment or an environment where you've already established your identity. So that difficulty does arise. Who am I? It's not so much about what you do, because who am I basically shapes what you do. So when I was in the UK as well, I had to learn very quickly because I had a very short period of time there. I mean, initially, that was the plan, to come back and practice. But it ended up, I stayed in the UK for about 14 years. I worked with the same university. In fact, I worked with them for 15 years because I moved to Qatar with my husband in 2015, but I continued to work for the university remotely until 2017 before I had my family. So the understanding of each culture is important because you have to also respect that culture in order to be accepted into that culture. It doesn't mean you need to change yourself, but sometimes you change yourself in relation to the adaptability. How do students relate to you? How do your colleagues relate to you? How do the stakeholders relate to you? So in order to make the transition as smooth as possible, you've got to understand the culture. It is similar when I moved from Qatar to Dubai. I also found that cultural challenge because Qatar was slightly more conservative despite the fact that there was a huge expat community. In the UAE, you find the same thing, but the first few years, I was basically struggling to find my niche. I was struggling to find my feet, as in, how do I thrive in this new environment? So, and that kind of exposure, that kind of adaptability is very, very crucial when you're moving from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So it's very important, for you, before you move to any country for that matter, to understand the culture, read about the culture. Of course, reading about it is one thing, but actually being with the people in that context is a completely different story altogether. And day by day, year by year, I've learned the culture really well, and I've assimilated that culture into my classroom as well. My students come from all walks of life. Most of my students actually are, civil lawyers. They all have a law degree already. They're all practicing lawyers, but they're coming to the university to get a common law degree. So the way I teach, my methodology, my teaching methodology is very different when I teach professionals coming from various jurisdictions. How do they relate to me? How do I make myself relevant in the classroom to civil lawyers? Teaching in the UAE, I can't just focus on English law. Although we teach English law, I can't just focus on English law. It is important for me to respect the fact that I am in the UAE, which means my students would have interest in studying, UAE laws. And I've got to bring that into the classroom to make it relevant. I think this is very, very important because if you come with the mindset that I'm only going to do what I'm told to do, and you don't expand yourself and you don't make yourself relevant, you don't make yourself sustainable. That sustainability is very important. So I've got to think of ways of learning the law. Of course, I had to learn UAE law very, very quickly, bit by bit every year, including it within the curriculum and teaching it to the students and I think inviting professionals to the university as well to share their own experience. So I think we are in a very, very versatile ground. We've got to be versatile. This is what I say. I am a specialist. Of course, I teach modules like company law. I've taught various modules, law of evidence, because I practice law in Malaysia as a practitioner. But I'm teaching company law. I'm teaching research skills. I've taught various modules, but I've got to think about how these modules can be made more interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, because law should not be perceived as a single discipline. In practice, when I was back in Malaysia, when I had a case on electricity company or something to do with marine shipping, I had to learn about shipping laws. And at that time, nothing was available online. So things are very, very different today. I also taught law to Singapore, to students in Singapore and in Dubai back in 2010, right up to 2015. I taught marine engineers, an MSc module. And I had to learn everything I could on the shipping industry, not from a law perspective, but from a practice perspective for marine engineers. So issues of health and safety, intellectual property rights, how do you minimize your risk when it comes to drafting a contract? Those important substances or those important teachings needs to be made as practical as possible. So I think in order to be a good academic, in order to become a good lawyer, you cannot just disseminate what you find on a theoretical aspect. You've got to look at it from a practical aspect, because that is what students want to learn when they actually finally graduate with their degrees.
So I have another important question, Dr. Shamini. Should strategy be taught in college?
Absolutely. From day one. If they can be taught in the foundation year, they should also be taught strategy from the very beginning. Students need to expose themselves to what is happening outside. I think we live in a day and age now, especially in the last decade or so, where if you don't know what's actually happening outside your law books, you will find yourself right behind the class. And this does not mean that this does not apply. This also applies politically, socially, financially, economically. It applies across all the board. If you want to be a dynamic person in your career, if you want to be unique, you want to be personable, these sort of general information, we call it general information, but they are knowledge, because law intersects with every single aspect of these disciplines. So strategizing your knowledge, how you inculcate yourself, how do you equip yourself with this knowledge is very, very important. Your strategies should start from day one. It shouldn't just be about, okay, I want to get a first class mark in my exams, or as in my first class degree and things like that. For example, in the UK, students are expected to complete a UCAS form. And within that UCAS application form, there is a section which talks about personal statement, where the students shares, what they have done previously. That personal statement is what decisions. I mean, of course, if you got your 3 A's, you will be pushed into you'll be pushed into the universities of choice. But that personal statement carries a lot of weight, because it speaks about you, the person, your attitude, your characteristics. I used to run a lecture in Newcastle for many, many years, and I think I'm probably the best person to run the lecture, because I tell the students that we don't really care about the merit of your qualifications, what you achieved in your A levels. But what is important is the molding of your attitude and your character. Because at the end of the day, if you think you have achieved it all, think again. Because it doesn't mean just because you got 3 A's 3-4 months ago, you're going to get 3 A's, you're going to get a first class mark. Hard work starts from day one. And it's not just about, and it's quite difficult for students, because not only do they have to do well academically, they've got to also think about employability skills. For example, at my university, we've got a Center for Employability, Professional Legal Education Research, and we try to create initiatives for students, opportunities for students to do employment opportunities, or things where they can do outside that helps them develop certain skills. And these skills, goes without saying, is very, very fundamental to their career. So students these days really have to throw themselves out in the deep ocean. They've got to learn as much as possible, even if it is not expected under the academic curriculum. Those who go further, those who do that extra step, that additional work, and strategize what their career is going to look like, maybe in year 1, year 2, year 3, are the ones who are going to be successful. And I think this is the difficulty. Students feel that they just have to do what they're supposed to do, but don't forget, when you put your head out, you are facing a million lawyers who are all after that 3 or 4 jobs. What makes you stand out? What is it unique about you that you become employable? So it's not just about the substance of the law, it's that additional characteristics, you as the person, that professional identity that you're molding every day as you go, and it keeps maturing as you progress in your career.
How does networking matter to a lawyer or a law student?
Significantly. So, as I mentioned, this connects to my earlier point. It's not just about what you study. I mean, of course, that's also important. You meet the grades, you qualify, and then you get to the right, hopefully you get to the right employment. But networking is finding someone who you feel is going to be able to help you to thrive in your own career. And networking starts from day one as well. So what I would advise my students is that, add me on LinkedIn. I always tell them that add me on LinkedIn, but of course there are so many other social media pages. There are so many blogs. There are NGOs that the students can actually, do an internship with. And they're all very, very competitive. So that is why you can't wait until year 2 or year 3. You should start already thinking about it in year 1. So networking can be attending an event, attending a conference, a workshop. And don't think about it as a transactional thing. It's not financially, it shouldn't be a question where is it financially viable for me. Pay the money if you have to attend a conference because you don't know who you might meet. I'm a strong believer of, if you might go for 50 conferences and you might meet that one right person at the right time, and he gives you the right opportunity, something that you've been looking for a long time. So these networking events shouldn't really be taken for granted. A student should really, journal every day. What are you doing in terms of building your career? So networking could be one aspect of it. Of course, academic could be one aspect of it. You can write a short little article, even 500-word article, and send it to LinkedIn. These things really matter. So start writing your CV from day 1. A lot of students don't even update their CVs until year 3 or year 4, the final year, because they feel that, I'm going to get lucky and I'm going to get a job. But there are too many graduates without a job. So if you want, you've got to start from the very beginning. The ideal thing to do from the very beginning to strategize is to write your CV from day 1 and see what are the gaps in your CV. What is it that you can do? What is it that you can add to your CV that will actually push your career? So writing to, say, for example, you find someone, who's attending an event. Do your research, and I do that a lot. I mean, like when I'm invited to speak at an event, I always see who are the people on the panel, because I have to have something to say to them. I don't want to be one of those who come in and go like, "Oh, hi, I'm Shamini, and who are you?" Because it feels quite disrespectful that you've not done the research earlier in time. So to show respect, to show interest, to show that you really care about your career, you should really show that that you have actually done the work. You should demonstrate that you've done the work. So for me, I feel networking is crucial. On the day of the conference, speak to everyone. Be humble about it. I mean, if you have done extremely well, speak about it. Speak to them first and say, I would really love the opportunity to work with you. Even if it's not transactional, even if you don't get any payment at the end of the day, the point is you have worked with, one of the big persons, one of the specialists in the field, and that is going to give you a lot of experience. So you've got to think about what you want in your career, as opposed to, how much of money you're going to make, because that eventually will kill the passion that you have. So keep the passion going, keep applying, keep putting yourself out there, and don't be scared. I think a lot of students feel like, we don't know, we might ask a stupid or silly question. And I think that's not a problem. You never ask a silly question. And there are a lot of people, a lot of lawyers out there, a lot of employers, people in prominent positions. If you ask the question right, they are willing to answer the question. I've read a lot of these books. Percy Ross is one of them. Ask for the moon and get it. If you ask the question, don't be shy. You never know, the answer may be in an affirmative. So you've got to think about various ways of actually asking the questions, but not asking the question at all, because that's a lost opportunity. So yes, networking is crucial in anyone's life, whether it's a student, whether as a lawyer, even with your 25 years of experience, 30 years of experience. I feel every time I'm at an event or I'm at a conference, I'm learning something new. And that learning should never stop until the day you kick the bucket. That's the way I look at it.
Dr. Shamini, as an ethics lawyer, how do you see lawyers using social media?
Very, very efficiently. So there are different social media platforms. You've got LinkedIn, which a lot of us are familiar with. We tend to post mainly professional posts, saying that LinkedIn tends to be more carefully drafted, where you don't see that personal element to a person. Compared to other social media platforms, YouTube is excellent in one way. You also have Facebook, you've got Instagram, you've got Twitter. So people use different social media platforms to showcase and demonstrate their skills and their work. It's good to follow them. So for a student, for example, now who's actually attended an event or conference, and they've met their, say for example, their guru, their, someone that they really look up to. They've met this partner of a firm, they take a photo, and then they had some intense discussion about the law. And what I would advise that person is to actually, make that visible. Visibility is very important, irrespective of the platform, the social media platform. Any visibility is good visibility. So if the student really wants to put themselves out there, this is how you go about it. So putting a post on LinkedIn or Instagram, I met with this person, putting a photo up, and then saying the intense discussion that they've had. I think that is also important to show credibility and also to show that the party is actually engaging with the current, discussions or debates in that specific field, and then tagging that person. And what is going to happen is the post will reach that particular partner and his contacts. So you are actually, targeting a wider range of audience as opposed to just that partner. His contacts are also included. So you've got to think in a very, very creative way in this day and age. You've got to think about your targeted audience as well. Who are you trying to reach? Now, when I speak about ethics, you can talk to ethics to anyone for that matter. It does not just apply to people in law. For example, now I'm the editor for the Global Wound Journal, which is a healthcare journal, and I'm specialized in the ethics field. Now, if I just focused on the law platform, it means that people who are involved, doctors, nurses, will not be able to see that post. So before you actually disseminate or publish any kind of post, think about who you're trying to reach. But of course, you have to make it visible. Today everything is about visibility. But also at the same time, I do say this to at the end of the day, yes, being visible is one thing, but you also have to have the substance that follows with that visibility. So, engaging, speaking about specific discussions, already doing your research far before meeting this person is extremely important. So it's not just about going there and being present and, making an appearance, but what you say also do matter.
Dr. Shamini, how do you see pro bono and community service playing a very important role for a lawyer in his initial stage of his practice?
I think it's very important, irrespective of what stage in your life and what stage your career is at. If you have the knowledge to impart, you've got the relevant skills that you feel maybe a certain group of people can benefit, why not? So don't limit yourself saying that I will do this after I graduate. I think that is a fundamental error on the part of any student or any person for that matter. It doesn't have to be a law graduate, but anyone for that matter. You do your own independent reading. One of the things that we do at our institution is we always tell our students, do your independent reading. We love the fact that, students come into the classroom and have a view that is different from yours, from the academics. And this is something we really, really cherish, and this is something that we really encourage. So even if you're in your first year, even if you are in your foundation year, I had this wonderful student who came and spoke about, what he had learned from another jurisdiction, about some political situation, and it was quite interesting, the take that he has taken, and he was a mature student, and you can see that kind of critical reflection within that student, which I really admired. So pro bono community service is extremely important. I mean, one of the things that I did back in Malaysia, before I even got into law school, was, since I was very interested in the vulnerable, I was very interested in child protection, I was very interested in women protection for that matter. And we worked with, a group of children who were child prostitutes. So it can start at any stage in your life. The passion is clear, the passion is important, because it shouldn't stop you from doing help or giving help, especially when you have the resources to give that help at any stage of your life. And I would strongly encourage it, irrespective of, as I just mentioned, irrespective of any stage of your life. So definitely pro bono and giving back is very, very important. And I feel that, when I go to events, and recently I was at I gave a talk at the Selangor Bar, which is the state bar of Malaysia. That took place on Monday. And I spoke about having a global career, what it takes to have a global career. How do you mold your professional identity in each jurisdiction? How do you thrive as a lawyer, or how do you thrive as someone in a career? And these are the sort of things that, we, especially for those who've actually had a lot of experience, to give back to the community, help others. Mentorship is very, very important. And I think that is one of the fundamental things within this profession that students can stand to benefit from. I've had some amazing mentors. I can't imagine what my life would look like without those mentors. And this is me paying back. So if students, and that's what I left the students, I gave 2 guest lectures in Malaysia, and I left the students saying, add me to your LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, no matter how silly you think they are, I don't think they're silly, please email me. I will see how I can help, how I can share, and how I can help you build your career and develop your self-confidence. I think we can do this. I mean, at the end of the day, I also belong to the ethics group. I used to belong in the ethics group when I was in the UK. I got 2 fellowships, one fellowship with the National Institute of Teaching Ethics alongside the American Bar Association. I attended the fellowship in 2014 in Georgia, Atlanta, and I also attended the same year fellowship in London at City University Legal Ethics UK. One of the most important things every ethics lawyer would talk about is you are a human being first before you become a lawyer. So let's not forget that very, very big component, that role that we have. Whether you're a judge, whether you're the most prominent lawyer in town, whether you are a client with $1 billion in your bank account, at the end of the day, it does not change the fact that you are a human being first. And I always say law endorses social practices, human behavior. Those days, people used to trade, the barter system, the negotiation. We didn't really have laws. People just picked up some rules. Okay, this is what you need to do, and this. But those came very much before law was actually implemented in Parliament. So law has to respect what took place centuries ago. And I don't think we should turn a blind eye to how it should be also now. We should respect those interactions, those environment, those contexts as to what it was then, now as well.
It's a great answer, Sham. As a lawyer, how do you maintain and manage a human relationship?
Well, consistency is key. If 10 years ago a client came to you, spent a lot of money, it doesn't mean he's forgotten after a year. If you want to build your clientele, if you want to keep that relationship progressing, if you have a business relationship with someone, it doesn't take much to make sure that you compile a list and send, it can be an Eid wish, it can be a Christmas wish, it can be a Happy New Year wish. And I think that is quite important to be informed. They should know that you are always there. It shouldn't just be a case of I took your money, I've earned something. It shouldn't be transactional. That's what I mean. It shouldn't be something that is of financial worth. At the end of the day, if you want to keep these relationships going, you've got to spend the money. I mean, one of the cultures that I've noticed in Malaysia, which is very, very striking, whenever someone gets a deal from you, what they do is they'll buy you something as a gift. And it's very touching. But at the same time, it's got a second meaning to it. And I get it. But that second meaning is that, you know what, we are doing this so that you come back to us. Not a lot of people do that. But this particular culture, very interesting enough, whenever they close a deal with you, they give you something back. They've taken your money, but they want to give you something back to show appreciation. And that's really beautiful, because I'll tell you what, 5 years down the line, even if I've not met this person or that company, I would still text them to check whether they're still around. Because it is nice to feel liked. It is nice to feel appreciated. You don't expect it, but it's nice to feel appreciated. So I think a very, very small gesture, keeping the momentum, keeping the consistency with all the clients that you've developed, even a small meal every year, inviting all the stakeholders that you have dealt with in the years before, and just having a small meal will help your business grow, then forgetting about them and working on new clients. Because you don't know, when you keep this consistency going, not a lot of firms actually do it. They just pick and choose like who's going to actually bring the most amount of wealth. You don't realize sometimes these older partnerships that you've had are the ones who are going to be more beneficial to you in the years to come. So moral of the story, don't take anyone or anything for granted, because you just don't know when you might need their help.
What is your vision for your students who are going to be the future lawyers?
Well, I wish them a very successful career. And in fact, I'm still in touch with most of my students since 2004. Some of them are on LinkedIn, some of them are actually on Instagram and Facebook. And they are free to get in touch with me for any advice that I can give. It's important to remain hardworking. As I've seen my career grow because of that focus on being hardworking, doing the research, strategizing in a very, very efficient manner. You've got to be smart about how you build your career. You've got to be smart. You've got to be empathetic. Lead with compassion and empathy. Business owners. Humility should not be taken for granted as well. Humility is quite important. Be humble. And one of the things that I've learned when I completed my PhD, which was on ethics and education and law, I became super humble because I realized how much I didn't know. They call it a permanent head damage program, but that damage basically is what I really revere, because I feel that I've become a lot more humble today about the knowledge that I have. And I hope my students who are doing the master's program, and any law program for that matter, are there to learn. They need to listen, and they need to act. They need to vision, and plan their lives accordingly. What would you want to achieve in the next 3 months, maybe 6 months, or a year, or 4 years, or 5 years. I mean, I find the long strategy planning quite difficult, but find out who you are and market yourself based on that one skill you think sets you apart from others. It might take some time, it might take a lot of reflection, what we call as education specialists, we call it being reflexive of who you are. And that will be your strength. And that will be the market changer, So students have to not take anything for granted, continue persevering, but also I think very important that people don't generally talk about is well-being. A lot of us work round the clock. We work 7 days a week. We are constantly working. I mean, we are here working today as well, So my advice to students also is work hard, but also play hard. Because the worst situation that you can be in is, you having a burnout. It's great to have a vision, but if you don't have your health, both your mental and physical health intact, it's not going to do you any good. So yes, work hard, plan time for activities that you can do that de-stresses you, but at the same time, keep that momentum going. But when it's time to rest, make sure you get that rest.
You being a lawyer, a woman, and an ethics specialist, how did these three interrelate to each other in your case?
As lawyers, as I said before, you're a human being first before you become a lawyer. So in child custody matters, which is something that I did in my trainee years, we had a case where generally when a couple divorce, the child goes to the mother. Generally, that's what typically takes place. Obviously, I speak for the vulnerable, I speak for those without a voice. But what we need to understand in custody matters is that the importance or the significance is no longer the husband or the mother, the wife. So they may have their own difficulties, matrimonial conflicts, and that is why they've gotten a divorce. But they mustn't forget the fact that the child had nothing to do with that marriage or that divorce taking place. So if I think that the mother is getting 100% custody and the father is not getting any custody whatsoever, my human being cap comes on. Because as a child, you want both your parents present in your life. And I think as judges and as lawyers, I think this is where it's not just about winning the case and saying, oh, I've got 100% for my wife, for the woman, and I've done the best and fantastic, and celebrate. I think what we need to focus on is the child, because in the UK as well, the child is of paramount importance, and giving some visitation rights or some custodial rights to the husband is also crucial. Provided, of course, one of the things I would say is provided the husband, the father is a good father and he did not fail in his responsibility towards the child. If we can have evidence to show that he is in fact reliable and a responsible father and he will be able to he stands within that parental figure label, then I don't see why the wife should take 100% of custody. There's got to be evidence to show otherwise. So despite the fact that even if I were to be acting for the wife or the female spouse, I would always also consider the fact that we've got to address the well-being of the child. So this is how ethics steps in. It's not, as a lawyer, it's not just about winning the case, it's also about making sure that everyone comes out of the trial unaffected. Of course, there will be some level of damage. There will be. Without a single shadow of doubt, litigation is acrimonious. Divorce is acrimonious. It can get very, very bitter. But we can lower that blow or reduce that blow by focusing on what the law says is of significance. And this is what I mean. Law comes a lot later because the relations between human is very important. Parental relationship to a child is important. The child must also succeed. The child must also, thrive in any economic situation, in any political situation, in any country. So we have to find a way to make sure that all parties come out of that proceeding without, facing too much of a damage. So this is how ethics actually steps in. And I think lawyers should be taught ethics not from the time they start doing their, the practitioner's course, the LPC or the BVC or the SQE. Lawyers should be taught ethics from the very beginning, from year one. And my PhD really talks about how values and ethics can be disseminated in each module. And it's very clear-cut to see. For example, now if you look at, one of the things, since I've brought up about the child, let's look at spousal compatibility in criminal cases. Say the husband has committed a criminal offense and the wife had witnessed that criminal offense. There is a law that prohibits prosecution from compelling the wife to come to court. Because the understanding there is that we are trying to protect the matrimonial sanctity between the husband and wife. Now, in the UK, there are some exceptions when the wife can be compelled to testify. I'm just using wife and husband there. It's not because I'm being discriminatory to any gender, but just it's easier to explain if I did this. But then when you look at Australia and New Zealand, and that is one of my research papers that I published with the Journal of Criminal Law some years back. But if you look at Australia and New Zealand, they have taken a complete different step and sets them apart from England, where the general rule there is every spouse becomes compellable to the prosecution, to testify for the prosecution irrespective, because a criminal offense has taken place. So they have prioritized the fact that a criminal offense has actually taken place against protection of matrimonial sanctity. So we have three jurisdictions. In fact, I can put four jurisdictions. We have Canada, England, Australia and New Zealand. And what you find is England and Canada seems to follow the exceptional rule. But Australia and New Zealand, they're slightly different from each other, but the general rule is they make the spouse compellable. So you have one set of facts, identical set of facts, but they're decided differently in these four jurisdictions, or rather in those two jurisdictions, England, Wales, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. So we need to question this. As lawyers, you asked me one of the questions, what would I advise my student? I would advise my student is not to take the law blindly and apply it. Question the law. Ask yourself, is this law actually serving the needs of society? Because if they're not serving the needs of society, then they become redundant. What is the point of obeying those laws? And this is something that you find that, culturally, these jurisdictions differ from each other, despite the fact that you have the exact identical set of facts. So the law is an unfinished business. It's still a very, very raw discipline. There's a lot of gaps. In fact, there's a lot of faults. There's a lot of error that you find within the law. Another example that I can give you is standards of proof. We know two standards of proof, which is the civil standard of proof and the criminal standard of proof. In the US, they've got a third standard of proof, which is called clear and cogent evidence. Something that sits, they call it intermediate standard of something that sits between civil standard of proof and criminal standard of proof. So in the UK, in England and Wales, they explain, and this is another research paper that I'd written, that the courts would, especially in cases where it involves arson in an insurance case, clearly it's a civil case, but it has a criminal allegation. So my question is, in the US, they would use the third standard of proof because it is not purely a civil case. It's got a criminal allegation, which makes it different from a purely civil case. So they use the third standard of proof. But in England and Wales, judges would try and put it under a civil case. And then they explain what the standard is. So you find that, jurisdictionally, every country, applies or, confronts a problem or resolves a problem very differently. So the question is, shouldn't the law be the same everywhere, despite the fact? So these are issues that we need, it can be cultural, it can be religious, there are various factors that play in deciding, it can be economic, so there are various factors that play in each jurisdiction. So my advice to the students is, when you try to develop a global legal career, that level of comparative analysis between different jurisdictions and how can you better the law in the jurisdiction that you're working in, find different ways of actually putting your thoughts across, and of course justifying it using evidence, because at the end of the day, no one talks without appropriate data. You need to have appropriate data to support anything you say, and this is how you build your career. Don't just accept the law as it is, because a lot of countries are making changes and law has to evolve. If the law fails to evolve, taking into account the needs of the society and, entrepreneurs, for example, then, it's not going to work as expected. It's not going to work the way it was actually designed to work.
Dr. Shamini, what is your role in the University of Birmingham, Dubai?
So I started working with the University of Birmingham, Dubai in 2018 August. I was employed as the program director of Social Sciences, Business and Law for the foundation program. So we had to set up all the modules, the programs, of course we had help from the UK campus, but as I mentioned, setting up a program and modules from ground zero in the UAE was a challenge, but we met all those challenges. In 2019, we set up the LLM program, and I was the pioneering batch for that as well from 2018, 2019. I was the deputy program director as well for the LLM program. And then for 1 year, I was the acting interim program director for the LLM program. And also led the Center for Employability, Professional Legal Education Research for 5 years. So I set up a program for students where, we had internship opportunities for the students, and I think 1 or 2 years we had 100% of internship for all our students, which was amazing. And then street law was one of them. We went into school, so that was pretty much pro bono work where students spoke about a module on entrepreneur to year 10 students before they come to university, to one of the local private international schools. So I did that as well. Right now, I'm the academic integrity officer. So basically, plagiarism. Students who use AI, get caught. So they see me. So I'm the lead for the college, actually, the College of Arts and Law. But externally, I've done quite a lot of work. As I said, I work 7 days a week sometimes. And I do program validation. I was invited to do one program validation with the Department of Abu Dhabi Department of Education and Knowledge. I also do program validation for Amity. I was also part of the Law Advisory Board. I am the legal advisor for the World Union Society, and also the editor for the Global World Wound Care Journal in the Ethics Division. I used to do some corporate training to one of the biggest oil company, Aramco. I don't know whether I should mention this, but I did a bit of corporate training as well. So yeah, I may have forgotten other things that I've done, but I attend conferences and give panel discussions, which I really enjoy. I love networking. I love meeting people, and I love sharing experiences and learning from them. And I've learned a lot in the last 8 years. I have to say it's been quite rewarding in a very, very large extent. I'm also the external examiner for one of the universities in London, so I hold that role for 4 years.
Thank you, Dr. Shamini, for giving your time for us and being on this podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. This has been a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.